avoir une belle maison dans un quartier sécuritaire
To
sous
have
notre
a
fier drapeau.
nice
C'est ça la
house
promesse du
in
Canada.
a safe neighborhood under a proud flag. This is the promise of Canada.
Je vais couper les impôts de 15 pour tous
I
les
will
travailleurs
cut income
moyens
tax by
à travers le Canada.
15% for all the average worker in Canada.
Nous ne serons jamais un État américain.
We
Jamais.
will never
Quand je
be
veux
an American
exploiter nos
state.
ressources
Never.
naturelles, bâtir des pipelines, c'est à la
When I
désavantage
want
de Donald
to
Trump.
take advantage of
On
our
va
natural
approuver
resources, build the
GNL
pipeline,
Québec pour
that's not
ramener
the
des
Donald
emplois
Trump's
au
advantage.
Saguenay
We
pour
will
pouvoir
approve
contourner
GNL
les
Quebec to bring
Américains
back
et
jobs
vendre
in
nos
the
énergies
Saguenay
en Europe.
to go around the Americans and sell our energy
Gardant les
to
pires
Europe.
criminels en prison. On va pouvoir protéger
By
les citoyens.
keeping the worst
On va
criminals in
couper les
prison,
impôts
we will
pour
be
les
able to
réinvestissements
protect
ici
our
au Canada
citizens.
afin de
We will
renforcer
cut
notre forteresse
income
économique.
tax to reinvest here in Canada to reinforce our economic fortress.
At your service.
Who's ready to axe the tax?
Il nous faut un nouveau gouvernement conservateur qui va approuver les projets, couper les taxes et les
We need a
impôts
new
pour emmener
conservative
les
government
jobs
which will
et l'investissement ici
approve
au Canada
government
pour faire face à Donald
projects,
Trump.
bring back jobs and investment here in Canada to face Donald
Monsieur
Trump.
Poilievre, bonsoir. Bienvenue à cette grande émission. On vous
Mr.
retrouve d'ailleurs ce
Poilievre,
soir à
good
distance,
evening
mais à
and welcome
Oshawa,
to this
où vous avez un rassemblement
show.
avec
We
vos
find
partisans.
you
Donc, merci
in
d'être
Oshawa
avec
tonight,
nous.
where you
La
have a
guerre
rally tonight
commerciale,
with your
évidemment, est toujours au cœur
people.
de cette
Thank you for being
campagne.
with us.
Qu'on aime ou
The
qu'on n'aime pas ça,
commercial
évidemment.
war is still
Alors,
at the heart of this
feriez-vous de mieux
campaign,
que
like it
Carney?
or
Monsieur
like it
Carney vient de
not.
nous parler de
So
la
what
riposte
would you
annoncée
do
aujourd'hui
better
par
than
le
Mr.
gouvernement.
Carter? Mr.
Que
Carter
feriez-vous de
just
mieux?
has just talked about how the Canadian government is going to react. What would you do better? I will split your questions in three parts. First of all, the immediate reaction. We need to react and target American products that we don't need, that we can do ourselves, or that we can buy elsewhere to maximize the impact on Americans while minimizing the impact on Canadians. Secondly, we need to come up with $3 billion in loans for companies in order to keep workers on the job. And finally, we need to get rid of the GST on cars that are built in Canada in order to encourage Canadians to buy Canadian cars, create demand in order to keep workers on the job. And then after that, after the elections, on the other hand, we need to demand from Mr. Trump to start negotiations anew on the free trade between Canada and the United States, and this immediately, because we will have to renegotiate it in any case. There's no choice about that. So why wait 18 months of chaos, of tariffs, of stupidity like we saw yesterday on television? We should say right away we need to renegotiate, and I will tell them very clearly that there are things that will never do, like surrender our sovereignty. We will never allow the Americans to use our water, our lands, and our border, our policies in terms of culture and language. But what we can offer is to have a greater military force here in Canada to do our just share. This is how I think we will be able to take care of this problem. And this is what I can do differently from Mr. Carney. What he wants to do is support a liberal policy which has cost a lost decade in our country. That is, keep our resources in the ground. He supports C-69, Bill 69, which is an anti-constitutional law opposed even by the Quebec government, which makes it so that it takes 17 years to authorize a mine. This is why we have given almost all our resources to the American. We don't have the possibility to shift the oil from one end of the country to the other, so he wants to keep the same policies. He still has the same ministers, and it's the same liberal promises. I want us to be masters in our own home, by approving projects here, which is going to create an economic fortress for Canada and make us strong vis-à-vis Donald Trump. Thank you very much. And Mr. Poilievre, good evening. We'll try to stay master of our time here, so if you can come up with shorter answers, it would be appreciated. One of the issues in this campaign is who's stronger to face Donald Trump. Many surveys say that Mark Carney is better than you are to face Donald Trump. How do you explain this perception, this impression by Canadians? Well, I'm not going to comment about surveys, but I will comment on reality. After the lost decades of the Liberal, we are weakened vis-à-vis the American. They've added 100,000 civil servants, increased income taxes and other taxes, blocked natural resources to send $500 million in investment to the Americans, and now Mr. Trump is getting 100% of our natural gas, 90% of our oil, because of the fact that the Liberals have blocked pipelines. We need to go to send our oil from Alberta through the United States to reach Quebec and Ontario. So all the power is in the hands of Mr. Trump. But excuse me, are you disadvantaged by your position as head of the opposition rather than Mr. Carney as Prime Minister? Well, it's always the case in foreign affairs. But at the same time, Mr. Trump wants, he wants Mr. Carney. He said it. He wants a weak Liberal so as to keep our economy dependent on the Americans. I put forward a very clear plan, for instance, to reinforce our economic fortress, that is, eliminate taxes on reinvestment of capital gains within our own economy, abrogate C-69 in order to be able to approve projects in 6 months rather than 17 years, eliminate economic barriers between the provinces so that we have ready-to-build zones where you can have pre-approved permits even before you apply. And this would help bring back GNL Quebec into Saguenay, a project which will allow us to go around the Americans and send our energy to Europe. This is another way of doing things to be independent economically. And we'll talk in a moment about that. Good evening, Mr. Poilievre. I just wanted to keep going in the same vein. Mr. Poilievre, a few weeks only, you were at the threshold of getting elected Prime Minister. But a lot of people in your own party have criticized you of keeping the same message instead of focusing on Donald Trump and focusing on the tariff war. Have you made a mistake here? You talk about other issues. The other issues, Madame Galipeau, is the fact that single mothers can't feed their children here after the lost decade of the Liberals. We have 2 million Canadians that go to food banks nowadays. Should I say, no, we're not going to talk about that? Shouldn't we talk about the young families in the 30s that can't afford a house because the cost is doubled during the decade the Liberals were in power? Shouldn't I talk about the fact that Quebec is at the point of rupture, immigration is at the point of rupture because of bad management? I want to bring back Canada, help this single mother to feed her children in a safe country, to supply housing which is affordable for our young people, or protect our immigration system and reinforce in that way our country. So I'm not going to say I'm sorry because I'm the only leader offering real solutions to the pain that Canadians are experiencing right now after the Liberal decade, the lost Liberal decade. Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. So let me continue in the same vein, Mr. Poilievre, about the commercial war here. According to all the surveys, this is the biggest worry, anxiety, and we're even talking about fear vis-a-vis Donald Trump, and we're going to choose a Prime Minister, either you or Mr. Carney. Don't you have the burden of proof here as to who who can best defend the interests of Canada, and you've said today, because for the last 2 days you've been talking more about Donald Trump than in the past, but you said he's not a reliable ally. So on what are you going to base yourself to negotiate with success with Donald Trump? What is it about you that makes you more competent to negotiate with an ally that's no longer reliable? Well, first of all, we need to reinforce our economy by bringing back hundreds of billions of dollars in investment that the illiberals threw out of our country. I propose many ideas to do so. For instance, to encourage free trade between provinces so that we can sell to one another, approve natural resource projects very quickly, and expand our ports so that we can have access to both the European and Asian markets. It's not through meetings that we're going to do that. We have to encourage working people by cutting income tax by 15%. This would encourage workers to spend in small businesses in their community. This is how we can be stronger and more independent. In terms of negotiating face-to-face with Mr. Trump, I can do that vigorously, and what I'm going to do differently from the Liberals the last time, the things that we're going to offer on defense, protection, security of our borders and access to markets, I'm going to do it in a way where we can withdraw it at the moment where Mr. Trump decides to go against these commitments. This is how we're going to tell him, if you want to block our products, we will withdraw what we've promised you also. And this is how we're going to encourage him to remain reliable. But let's be honest, nobody can control Donald Trump. And this is why it was such a big mistake by the Liberals to weaken our economy and to become almost 100% dependent on the United States. We need to be master in our own house by bringing back economic strength in the country. Some people would tell you, Mr. Poilievre, that this dependency, free trade goes back 40 years. So there were conservative governments, Republican presidents that built this economy, not Canadian economy, but a global economy based on free trade. But you have an ally, Daniel Smith, who went to the United States to deliver a message in a media, Breitbart, and telling the Americans that put a pause on tariffs because, in the end, this is not helping our leader, Mr. Poilievre, because he's very aligned with Mr. Trump's ideas. What do you say to that? Well, that's not the case. Mr. Trump has already indicated that he wants Mr. Carney and the Liberals in power. Mr. Carney and Mr. Trump agree on a lot of things, but what about Daniel Smith? Well, both of them want taxes on our industry. Mr. Trump wants to do it with tariffs. Mr. Carney wants to do it with a industrial carbon tax. The two taxes together will destroy our industrial base. And secondly, Mr. Trump wants to show his will to strike down Bill 96 in Quebec. Mr. Carney wants to go in court to challenge it. So they go in the same vein here. And Mr. Carney has the same policies as Justin Trudeau, the same ministers. They weaken our economy, the cost of housing, the national debt has gone up. That's weakened our economy and has put us in a place where Mr. Trump can take advantage of us. I think that the Trump advantage the Trump administration knows that it's the worst thing if I come to power. So Mr. Trump said, he talked about Bill 96, but he also talked about the digital giants, the GAFAMs, and he said that he didn't want a 3% tax on these digital giants. If you become Prime Minister, will you maintain this tax on the GAFAMs? Yes, I support that tax. The principle is just. The idea, Madame Dussault, is these companies earn money here in Canada. So the principle is that they should also contribute where they earn revenue. So I think that on that question, we need to keep this tax in place, but we need to cut other taxes to bring back investments in Canada for small businesses, for farmers, take off GST for new housing to make them more affordable. This is the tax cuts that I want to propose, but not tax cuts for the digital giants who otherwise would pay nothing here in Canada. Mr. Poilievre, with the commercial war in which we are in with the U.S., recessions is on our doorstep. If you become Prime Minister, what is the first decision that you would take to protect Canadians? Well, we need to protect jobs, because once the link between worker and their job is broken, it takes years sometimes to fix that, and it costs much more for the government to support somebody who's unemployed to keep them in their job. So today I've announced a $3 billion fund in loans, and it's the same type of programs that we created during the Harper government in 2008, 2009, and it's allowed us to save tens of thousands of jobs. At the same time, we need to bring back private sector investment. Yes, we have an incredible growth in government, but you can't build the economy with bureaucrats or civil servants. So we need to go to the private sector. So I propose a tax of zero on capital gain, as long as those capital gains are reinvested in our economy. This will encourage those that have invested elsewhere to bring back their money to invest here in Canada. This will allow companies to sell an asset which is not productive to buy another. For instance, a manufacturing concern that could sell a land for somebody to build housing and use also that money to build another factory. This creates a lot of jobs, a lot of wealth, and the infrastructure to make us independent Americans necessitates investment. And this is what I'm going to encourage with tax cuts and paperwork. Based on your promises, you said that you would push back capital gains as long as it's invested in the Canadian economy. You also talked about increasing by $5,000. I just want to make it clear for investments in Canada, to bring back investments here in Canada. I'm sorry for interrupting you. No problem, no fault. You also said that you wanted to get rid of GST on a new house of $1.3 million and less. All those measures, don't they favor more the rich than the middle class? Like, who can put $5,000 more in their tax-free account? Who can buy a house at $1.3 million? Well, first of all, let's start with the house. The fact is that after the last decade of the Liberals, the housing cost has doubled. Who buys a $1 million house? This is the average price in Vancouver and Toronto. $1.1 million is the average price in those two markets. They're the most expensive housing market in North America and the second and 10th most expensive in the world. We've had the worst inflation in terms of housing in the last 10 years, at the same time that Mr. Carney was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. So, when I was responsible for housing as a minister 10 years ago, if you would have talked about a $2 million house, I would have said, whoa, what a house. But today, this is an average house. In Toronto and Vancouver, let's specify. Just to make... Yes, of course, but also elsewhere in the country, it's much more expensive than it was. Rents have doubled, housing costs have doubled. I will eliminate the GST on houses that are worth less than 1.3 to allow young people to save up to $60,000, and also accelerate permitting in municipalities to come back to prices that were around when I was minister 10 years ago. Let's talk about tax cuts. I propose cutting by 15%, but this is for revenues between $15,000 and $55,000. So this is the working class that I'm encouraging here. These are the people who are going to get the greatest savings in percentage-wise. Now, the tax-free account, we think that it's people with a lot of money, but often it's a woman whose husband has died. She inherits money, or it's an elderly couple that sell their house to go in a smaller apartment because of health problems. So it's not just rich people that put money in their tax-free account. But it's just another thing that we should encourage. Older people who decide to continue working. Right now, they're losing a lot in terms of income tax and deductions. I will allow them to earn $34,000 income tax-free to encourage people who want to bring their experience with the economy. Let me come back to my promise about GNL Quebec. I want to talk about it. I'll respect my promises too. Can we agree that GNL Quebec, there's no promoters for it right now? Yes, but this is a problem with the chicken and egg. There are no promoters because projects like that have been banned literally by the federal government through Bill 669, which prevents the building of pipelines or gas pipelines. It takes 10 years to get a permit. The Squamish, the native people in British Columbia, it took them 14 years to get a permit for a gas liquefaction plant. So you're saying that you get rid of C69 and promoters will come running? The spokesperson of GNL Quebec says this is a political balloon. Is it so that you're selling something that doesn't actually exist? It doesn't exist because it's been banned. It can't exist with the Liberals in power. But on the other hand, serious investors were ready to put $4 billion before the Liberals came with new rules to block the whole thing. I've also announced a plan about ready-to-build zone, where you have limited zones where certain types of economic infrastructure would be pre-authorized, for instance, like natural gas, I foresee doing that at Laveille, in an industrial zone that's already there, to give permits ahead of time with standards that are strict, to give a certainty and rapidity. With this project, we could hit the Russians and go around the Americans simultaneously. This would allow us to sell our gas in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Greece, all these countries that have been asking for our gas, and with a country that comes back here to definance Putin and break his monopoly on the energy market in Europe. This would be a great victory for us and for Trump, and a defeat for Putin and for Trump. Mr. Poilievre, let's keep going on international relationship because you're talking about Putin and Russia. Just one word. We were saying that Donald Trump has turned the international order upside down. So should Canada reorient itself, find new allies, and cease having the United States as its closest ally?
Les États-Unis sont
plus grands que Donald Trump. Oui, c'est vrai qu'il nous a trahis. United States are larger than Donald Trump. It's true that he betrayed us. There's no question about it. He's not reliable. He broke the agreement that he signed with Canada. But at the same time, we live next door to the U.S. It's the biggest military and economic power in the world. We need to be pragmatic. We need to plan ahead of time. The best thing that we can do to protect our interest against the bad decision is to reinforce our own economy. With the decisions I've just said, and I'll repeat it in French again, we need pipelines because it's only a pipeline that will allow us to stop giving away our oil at a low price to Americans while remaining dependent on a president that's not reliable. And 75% of Quebecers agree with a pipeline. if we want to sell our goods and services in Europe and Asia, it's not, we already have agreements, free trade agreements with them. What we need is not more talks, it's the infrastructure to send these resources to these overseas countries. You talked about Ukraine. If you are elected Prime Minister, are you going to support the European countries' efforts to support Ukraine against the Russian invasion? Yes. The Conservatives are strongly in support of the territorial integrity of Ukraine. This was an invasion that was non-provoked on the part of Russia against Ukraine, and this is why Conservatives were thanked by the Ukrainian government for suggesting to give missiles that the Canadian government was going to destroy. And now these missiles are used by the Ukrainians to defend their own territory. I'm a supporter of Ukraine, and I will remain a supporter as Prime Minister. The Trudeau government has reopened the door to sending troops in Ukraine after a ceasefire, after a peace agreement. Do you agree with that? Well, we need to be realistic. At the moment, Canadian military is massively weakened after the last decade of the Liberals. They've bloated the bureaucracy, wasted money for purchases that were way outside the realm of budgetary possibilities. So we need to recognize that our military are short on personnel. There are 10,000 positions that are not filled. We're late in our military purchases. Our first priority for our military is to reinforce our presence in our own territory. Mr. Trudeau couldn't even prevent a Chinese balloon to go across Canada. We need to have the capacity to defend ourselves, and this is what I'm going to do. So we're going to reinforce our military here in Canada first of all, and before talking about projects elsewhere. Okay, I want to move quickly, Mr. Poilievre, because I need to respect a given time period. I understand, Mrs. Galipo. You say that to invest in our defense, we will need to cut in international aid. But isn't Canada a country rich enough to be able to help people in need in poor countries? Well, listen, Mrs. Galipo, I'm not the type of politician that's going to promise putting money everywhere. This is how we got the worst inflation in 40 years during the last 10 Liberal reign. But it's a 1/4 of 1%, Mr. Poilievre, of our GDP. 1/4 of 1%.
Et la meilleure façon pour le
I
Canada
need
de
to make
contribuer
choices,
à notre
and
monde,
the best
c'est
way
d'avoir un
for
militaire
Canada
qui est
to
fort et
contribute
capable de défendre
to the world
notre
is to
territoire.
have a military
Donc,
which
oui,
is
il y a
strong
beaucoup
and
de
able to
gaspillage
defend our
dans
territory.
l'aide à l'étranger,
So yes,
l'argent que
there's
le
a lot
gouvernement
of waste
donne aux dictatures,
in
aux
foreign aid,
groupes liés aux terroristes,
money
et aux
that the government gives to
bureaucraties
dictators,
globales. Je vais
to
ramener
groups
cet
related to
argent ici
terrorism,
au Canada et
and
mettre
to
ça pour nos
global
soldats,
bureaucracies. I want to
nos
bring
troupes,
back this money in
notre
Canada,
équipement.
use that for our
Quand
soldiers,
vous parlez des
our
terroristes,
troops, our
Monsieur
equipment. But who are you talking about when you're talking about
UNRWA,
terrorists, Mr. Poilievre?
dont au
But,
Gaza,
I'm
le
talking about
gouvernement
UNRWA.
libéral continue de financer
In
UNRWA.
the Gaza
C'est un
Strip,
organisme
the Liberal government
dont
keeps
on a trouvé,
financing UNRWA. This is an
des
organization
membres de Hamas qui sont
where it was found
encadrés
that
dans
members
la
of Hamas
bureaucratie,
were
et eux autres
embedded
ont contribué
within the
aux
bureaucracy of
attaques
UNRWA,
du 7
and they
septembre,
contributed to the
et
attacks
été
on
renvoyés,
the
Monsieur
7th
Poilievre, ces
of
gens-là. Ils ont
September.
été renvoyés.
Well, they were fired, Mr.
L'UNRWA
Poilievre,
peut
these people.
s'occuper
They
de
were
l'aide
fired.
alimentaire à
And
Gaza.
only UNRWA can take care of
Avec tout
food
respect,
aid in Gaza,
c'est
no?
connu depuis des décennies que
With
UNRWA
all the
est
respect
impliqué avec Hamas
that I
et
have for
d'autres
you,
groupes
it's been known
terroristes.
for decades that
Donc,
UNRWA has
et c'est
been
simplement
involved with
après que
Hamas
c'est
and
éprouvé.
other
Moi, je vais pas
terrorist groups,
financer les
and
terroristes
it's
ou
only
les
after
dictatures.
this was
Les
proven. I'm
libéraux
not
ont
going to
donné
finance
250 millions
terrorists or
$ à la
dictatorships
dictature
to
à
whom
Pékin pour bâtir
the
des
Liberals
ponts
have
et
given
des pipelines et des
$250
autres
million, for
infrastructures
instance,
chinois.
to the
Si je veux
dictatorship
bâtir l'infrastructure
in Peking
ici au
to build
Canada, c'est
bridges
ça
and
mettre le Canada
pipelines.
d'abord après tout.
Très bien, merci, Monsieur Poilievre. Alors, M. Poilievre, quand on regarde vos propositions d'exploration, d'exploitation des énergies fossiles, de pipeline, le gaz, etc.,
exploration of fossil energy, gas, etc., it's difficult to understand that you want to go against climate change. Let me give you an example. The tram in Quebec, the tramway in Quebec, on which we've spent already hundreds of millions, and you would not finance the tramway in Quebec. Yes or no?
Merci.
Les gens dans la région de la capitale nationale ne veulent pas ce programme qui est un gaspillage d'argent. Moi, je vais mettre l'argent à côté
infrastructure, which is a wastage of money. I'm going to put the money on the third link. That's what the people want in Quebec, and they need a third link. So the Bloc and the Liberals want a tramway. I want a third link. Well, the third link, there's still no project. We don't know how much that's going to cost. Thank you very much, Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Poilievre, you're against the principle of the secularity law in Quebec. Why do you oppose yourself to a law duly adopted by the National Assembly in Quebec? Well, first of all, I accept the idea of secularity, that the state should not be involved in religion. I believe at the same time that individuals should be able to choose their own religious signs, their own clothing, and I think that people shouldn't have a state that forces them to wear or not wear something. Even for people in authority like policemen and judges. Yeah, well, a police officer. Let me give you an example. On my security detail, I have a member of the RCMP protecting me and my family. He wears a turban. He's ready to save my life. He's ready to save my children's life by giving his own life. Yeah, should I tell him that he shouldn't have a job because he's wearing a turban? For me, I don't agree with that. I respect people because I understand that in Quebec there is a will to protect the secularity, and I agree with that. Just very respectfully, I don't agree with that specific law. One last question, Mr. Poilievre. The Trump administration is expulsing thousands of migrants from Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, and elsewhere. If these people show up at the Canadian border, are you going to greet them? You know, because of everything happening in the U.S., or will you hand them over and back to the U.S. authorities quickly? We need to have legal immigration. I have nothing against legitimate refugees. My wife was a legitimate refugee here in Canada. At the same time, people need to come here in an orderly manner. The problem that we have right now are asylum seekers that are bogus, and their numbers have exploded during the Liberal years, and this has caused an enormous pressure on our health system, on housing, on jobs, and so we need to come back to a system where the number of immigrants that arrive in the country is lower than the supply of houses, of jobs, and health services that we have. And this is the approach that I would adopt as a Prime Minister. Thank you, Mr. Poilievre. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you very much for participating in the show. And the next time I'll be there in person. Oh, I promise.